think it's time now. It's already, well, 6:07. Yeah, I would like to welcome all of you to our today's panel discussion on Uppsala's perspective on food waste. And we have invited 5 speakers here today. And yes, thank you. So me, Jakob, and Maria are today's moderators. And for the panel discussions, the panelists are Alba from Bruised Food Club. She's the chairperson. Then we have Arland, who is the team leader of communication. Then we have Max Whitman from Permakultur, Ultuna. And then we also have Claudia from Ultimat leverans. You are leveransansvarig, so I guess you're going to tell us what that is later. And then we also have Ingrid Strid from SLU. You are a researcher at SLU. Okay. So the schedule for today is that, well, we have first have this welcome note, and then we're going to start with the panel discussion right away. We were thinking of having a small break around 7, and then from 7:20 to 8 we have a question and answer session, and afterwards there's always time for more fika. So, and I'm also from Bruised Food Club, so I just wanted to present some figures to you. So what is Bruised Food Club? We're going to talk about this a little later, but we want to prevent food waste by collecting food from local suppliers, and then we have our markets, and here's just a couple of numbers. So from last year on until today, we had around 3,000 attendants to our markets. On Facebook, we have more than 2,000 subscriptions. In the moment, we have almost 50 volunteers that work within this organization, and until today, we have saved almost a little more than 8,000 kilos of food. Yeah, and before we start with the panel discussion, I thought it would probably be good to set the mood. 2 weeks ago, we had the COP26. I'm sure pretty much all of you are aware of this, and many of you have followed that. And we know that food waste plays a critical role in for greenhouse gas production. So we know that almost 10% of the greenhouse gas emissions are from food waste. And also we know that a lot of the food that is actually produced is wasted. So 40% of the food that is produced ends up in the garbage. And today we will talk about different parts of the supply chain. And yeah, with that, I will, we will start the panel discussion.
So yes, well, thank you all for coming. I am also part of BFC, and well, we would like to create like a relaxed atmosphere tonight, and like that we all are able to share your thoughts about food waste. And to that, we would like to ask you, if you want, to use Menti. So we know that just in Sweden, around 70% of the food that is wasted at the consumer level. So that is at households. I don't know if you knew that number, and we want to know what you think about it. So you can go to your phone, and you can, well, there is a code, starts with 2. I'm not gonna read it. And you can tell us how you feel by knowing that fact, right? That is that in this country, or in developed countries at least, most of the food that is wasted is wasted at the consumer level. So I can read the possible answers. I feel guilty / responsible. I feel motivated to take action. I feel sad and paralyzed. I don't think it's a big issue. So yeah, those are the possible answers. So far we have very motivated persons here. I guess that's why you are here anyways. And that is nice to hear. So while you are still voting, I can also read to you some facts. I don't know if you know the Sustainable Development Goals, but we have set the goal. United Nations have set the goal to halve the food waste production per person by 2030. So that's a big task, right? So I guess you all already voted. So the winner is, I feel motivated to take action. And that feels very good to hear, right? And with this question, we want to start a panel discussion. And we're going to start in the order that I have here in my list. So that is with Alba first. So how we want you to share a bit, how do you feel with this question? And then also to answer, to show us a bit of how Bruised Food Club is doing, how is approaching this subject, and in what part of the food chain is working with.
Do you want to know how I feel, like how I personally feel?
Yes. How would you answer this question to share with us?
Because I don't have time to answer it. I feel motivated to take action, but at the same time, I feel like this figure is a big burden on the consumer, and I don't want to forget, and I don't want people to think that it's just on the consumer, because further up in the supply chain, there are a lot of factors that influence consumer decisions. So it's not only, I want to think and I want to tell myself it's not only on me, so it doesn't feel like a burden that paralyzes me, because sometimes we might feel this way. And the second question was how BFC is tackling this.
Yes, now you can tell us about what is BFC doing, what you're doing in BFC, and how is BFC approaching this subject of food waste.
Mm-hmm. So Bruised Food Club is collecting food from different suppliers, and one of them is a wholesaler, and the other one collects bread from bakeries. So that would be, retailer. So we don't save food at the consumer level. We don't save food from restaurants, not yet, at least. And then we do other things, like probably some of you already know. We organize events like this one. So we are trying to reach out to the people and the consumers, and try to create a space where we can share thoughts and where we can learn how we can be better at creating sustainable food habits and food consumption. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we want all of you to answer the same question, so maybe we can continue with Max. So how do you feel by knowing this fact? I don't know, maybe you knew already. And then how you at your organization deal with or approach food waste in your work?
Yeah, well, this is a new experience talking into microphone. I always feel motivated. These challenges, in a way, I think it's a burden on our generation to be faced with all these challenges, but it's also an opportunity that we're faced with to take on a big challenge and to really do something. And I think of myself as a doer, and I really see the entire food system, not only at the waste, but the entire food system and other forms of systems and the relationship to the natural world as an opportunity to do something good, and it can provide meaning also. So that's how I feel about that question.
And then Permakultur.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, me and my brother, we started the Ultuna Permakultur, and we're basically showing what you can do with biologically dead spaces in urban environments. So we have a lawn where, some grass grew, but not a lot of other biodiversity. And we wanted to show what can be done here, because the way I see food waste, you can see it as the food has already been produced, and now we're not eating it. But we have all of this land in our urban environments, agricultural land, that sits there, and we're not really doing anything with it. And if we're not doing anything with that, that means production has to happen somewhere else, including fossil fuels, including shipping, including all of that. So in a way, we perceive food waste as not utilizing the available spaces in urban environments. In Uppsala, in the villas around here in Uppsala, there is over 2,000 hectares of farmable land that during high production season could produce 1,100% of Uppsala's vegetable needs. That's food waste also to us. And we want to work really early with saying, how can we produce food locally? And how can we make sure that we don't export the problems onto other places all of the time? If we don't take charge of the problems where we live, we're exporting that work, that labor, that energy onto somewhere else. And that's not really necessary in around here in Uppsala or in other areas where we have taken land, but we're not really utilizing it in any meaningful way. So that's how we're working with food waste.
Great, thank you. Then yes, Claudia, you can maybe answer this question and tell us what you're doing also.
So,
Ultimat.
Sorry, I'm also not accustomed to microphones. So Ultimat is Ultuna cooperative, food cooperative, and based at SLU. And so food waste for us isn't a big issue in the food cooperative world, because what we do is by definition redirecting food away from supermarkets, and so therefore avoiding that waste stream. So by their very nature, food cooperatives reduce food waste from the very source. So I would say that that if you join a food cooperative, then you're doing something proactive, or if you work for a food cooperative, you're doing something proactive to avoid food waste from the source, from the beginning. Because a lot of food, for example, that would otherwise go to a supermarket, and then all of the food waste that you all know about that takes place. And if a farmer or a producer produces food that they sell through a food cooperative like Ultimat, then that food is diverted away from the waste stream. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So Alan, as part of VFC and then also as part of the communication side, that's another maybe approach, like communication. How do you feel about this question, and what's your role in VFC? How do you think communication is important, or the role that it takes?
I'm the one that voted guilty. But I think it's because I don't have, at times, enough information to reduce my own food waste. And I think it's because today I had to throw away some food that was spoiled. And I need to learn more about how to avoid that. Because the food had been spoiled and I wasn't able to eat it. But that also makes me motivated. But I was only allowed to vote for one of them. But it makes me want to learn more, and that's kind of what we do at communications and at education. Where we try to teach people how to better take care of their food, how to store it better, how to use it better, and when you feel that it has gone bad, that it actually hasn't at times, and you can still use it. So I have made some changes in my own life, and I have tried to learn and teach other people as well. Through Bruised Food Club, I've learned a lot of ways to reduce my own food waste. I've been inspired by permakultur, because next year I'm going to grow my own food, hopefully. I'll try. And I've tried to kind of steer away from big supermarkets when it comes to food, and I've gone more to like local farmers. And now that I know about Ultimat, you might have a new customer. But I think we can all do a bit more, and I think that the number is quite large. But as Alba said, a lot of it is still at the higher levels. We can still do something, but I don't think we can feel guilty all the time, because then we won't want to learn anything.
Yes, definitely. And then, no, we can use this one. So last but not least, we have Ingrid from SLU. So if you can share how do you feel about this question, about this fact that, of course, you probably knew, and then how do you work with this subject as a researcher in SLU?
Okay, if we start with how I feel about this, to start with, I don't really believe in this figure because I think it's underestimated in earlier stages of the supply chain. And also, I think maybe we should think a bit about the quality of the food that's wasted in household and like retail stores. Yeah, so it's usually, well, maybe there are like small pieces of something you could eat inside of a package or something, and it's by definition it's edible food, but maybe it's hard to get it. Whereas if they threw away a full package at the retail store, to me that's more wasteful, sort of. Yeah, so that's maybe answering that. And what I'm doing at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, as SLU means, if you didn't know. I'm doing research on different stages of the food supply chain, so both food loss and food waste. I started out with a study on retail stores, and now I'm doing research on losses at slaughterhouses, and also looked into loss of animals at primary production. And then we have PhD students that do things. So we have one that's studying Matcentralen, the city mission, where they get donated food and have it out to food bags to people. And we're measuring the throughput there, how much is going all the way through, and also try to find social indicators to see what good is it to give out food like that. And we also have research on schools and the food in schools, and how you can work with models to forecast how many guests you're gonna get. So instead of cooking for everyone that signed up for the school, you cook for the number of people you expect to come to the dining hall. So, and we have some upcycling project, I would say, with potato protein and so on. Some different things. And we launched a course last year that we've done now for 2 years. Alba, one of the students. Yeah. Oh, Maria. Oh, sorry. It was a bit on Zoom, actually. So I don't really recognize everyone. I know. Okay.
Yes, it sounds like you're doing a lot of things. So, yeah, sounds exciting. How does this look in the camera?
Okay, and now we want to move to another question. So, what do you think are the biggest biggest challenges to reduce this incredible amount of food that is wasted? What can we do? Where would we start to target? Where would you start really? And what do you think are the challenges? And I'm just going to start with you, Max.
We can
Oh.
wait a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, there's another Menti? Yeah, apparently.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go for that.
So then we start with the Menti first, and then.
Whoa.
So the response are coming in is quite a lot. So yeah, so with that, maybe I give the microphone to you now.
Yeah, this is one of those questions where you need 100 different scientists and practitioners to gain a lot of perspective, because I think this is what so I do a PhD in complexity and natural resource management, and we work with something called a wicked problem, where there are multiple contexts coming together to form the actual problem. So you won't be able to isolate where the problem is and then apply a solution. So what is the most important action to reduce food? I think maybe has less to do with the actual food and more to do with the entire way we have a relationship with the soil and with the natural world. I think that food waste is inherent. I'll start here. Food waste happens as in we don't eat the tomato we produce, but there's also a greater perspective that we need to take on waste. In the production of a tomato that I even eat, you have a lot of energy that goes into that production. You have a lot of energy that goes into that shipping of that production. You have a lot of social factors, environmental factors that are put into that. And that is a long production chain where you create a lot of waste that's beyond only the food. So how do you reduce food waste? I think is a question of how do you create a different relationship to the environment? And I think one way that we're working with that in Ultuna Permakultur is by creating a reconnection to the soil. We see a lot of people in the urban environments that, well, they couldn't tell you how a tomato is grown, and that may seem far away from related from food waste, but as we have had events where we planted potatoes or trees or etc., we have seen people come and put their hands into the soil and do something practical with the soil. Reconnecting, feeling, what does it feel like? How is the clay, the organic material, etc. And you can see how that starts to build a relationship. And that is a relationship that will spiral on through the system, maybe getting you to produce more of your own food, breaking this industrialized food system that will inherently produce waste. So the problem, what I'm saying here, is we can't apply a mechanistic mindset to the solution. We can't solve food waste as if we're trying to fix a car. We got to try and fix the relationships to the fundamentals. That is my belief. And one of those is change our relationship to soil, change our relationship to food by start practicing growing a garden. Somebody here wrote local food production. I wrote deindustrialization. And I think that that's what we got to start doing from grassroots levels. Start reconnecting to the soil, to the natural environment, produce our own food, and create a different relationship to these critical resources. And only then will we actually see these effects spiral out, and we can reduce food. So I'm less interested in applying a top-down solution and more interested in building new relationships from the bottom up. But I could talk about this all evening. I shouldn't take everybody's time.
I actually agree with the... Yes, I agree with Max. I actually wrote shorter food supply chain, so I can maybe give a different touch to it. yeah, I think we are disconnected from where the food comes from. We are disconnected from where everything comes from. But it's so easy to just go to the store and buy something, right? And because we have opportunities here and we live so comfortable, we don't really need to think about it. But a lot of tragedy happens along the way, and just because we don't see it, we allow it, right? So I would say shorter food supply chains. Yeah, be more connected to the soil, be more connected to the person who's growing your food. Yeah, and also education. I also wrote education because it's also part of everything, right? Like sometimes if we know a bit more about what's happening, how things are happening, then we might change how we do things, even though a lot of it is also convenience. So yeah, there are a lot of factors, and I don't think there's one right answer. It also has to do with what you feel inside that matters the most. What else was here? Buy less food, yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of things. Of course, the governments should make policies, but again, people should be educated on what's important, right? When it comes to be more sustainable and reduce food waste. So again, it boils down to education and connectedness, I would say.
So I was trying to write on here, but I was told that I've got too many words, so I couldn't write anything, which was, don't go shopping when you're hungry. Because I've done that so many times, you know. I don't have a shopping list, I go spontaneously shopping, and I'm really hungry, and oh my God, that packet of biscuits, I have to buy it. But do I have to buy it? Am I just going to throw half of it away? So I think the one thing that we can do is to plan strategically what we're going to buy for the week. And if you shop in a food cooperative, what happens is that once a month, well, with Ultimat, food cooperative anyway, once a month, if you're a member, you get a document that comes into your inbox, and you click on it to open up the document. I wanted to have this on the screen so you could see it, but anyway, you can join Ultimat and see how it works. And then you go through, you have a list, and you have about a week to decide what you want to buy. So you can see, you go and get some flour, you can get some honey, you can get some oats, some fresh vegetables, some chutney, some, I don't know, whatever. There's so many things, jam, all sorts of things that you can buy. And it's all produced in the region where we live, in the Upplands region. And it's all ecological. And so you've got a week to look in your fridge and look in your cupboards and think, actually, do I need this? What am I buying? What do I really actually need in my house? And I think that that's a really good way to buy things, so that we're not just buying stuff spontaneously that we may or may not eat, or we just think, oh, I like the look of that, but actually it just sits in the fridge until it goes rotten, and what's the point? One of the other things that struck me is that one of the things that Ingrid said about schools, I think it's really important to think about who are the people who provide the food, the catering companies and the wholesalers who provide school meals, hospital meals and prison meals, which the Commune is totally responsible for in the majority of the cases. If that school is growing its own food and has a food garden, like, for example, the Waldorfsteiner School in Hågeby, then a lot of the food is grown by the children, for the children and the staff, and they eat it. Because if you grow your own food, as our friend here will tell you, you will not waste it. I grow a lot of my food that I can during the season, and we don't waste it because we spent all that time and energy growing it. And why would you throw away something that you've grown yourself? So I think it's really important to have a connection, a personal connection to where your food comes from. And I think that that's something that's been lost over the generations. And I think that now people are coming back finally to where does my food come from, and can I be responsible for growing more of my own food? And if you can do that through a food co-op, or you can do that through a farmer's market, or through a community garden, or whichever way it is that you find that you can get your own food without wasting it, then that's a really, really big deal, and that should happen in every case. And I don't know why more people don't get involved with these organizations, actually.
I agree completely. I wrote down information because I don't know enough about it. I don't know how to grow my own food, but I want to learn. I was never taught as a kid. I wanted that opportunity, and I want the next generation to have that opportunity to grow their own food at school. I feel like when it has happened that I have grown my own food or made my own food, I don't waste it, because as you said, I know how long it took me and how many attempts until I got it right. And I think we need more of that. So I agree. And also, something Alba said earlier, get to know your farmers and the people growing the food. I've tried to do that as well. And I've also started having shopping lists and eating something before going out and shopping. And that has reduced my food waste. I have a bit more cash now that I don't waste on crisps and stuff like that. I think everyone is capable of reducing their own food waste, and I think there's a lot more that we can do, but we need to know how to do it. So, information.
Okay. Yeah, in my opinion, I wrote this buy less food because I think that's one of the core things we should do. Try to postpone buying new food one more day and see if you can, by doing that, use some of what you already have at home. And I think if more people do that more often, we can reduce the total volume of food that is bought, which will in the end lead to less waste. Actually, to make it a bit more fun, I can say I don't agree on one thing. I don't agree on planning, at least not for everyone. I remember one time we were guests at another family, and they went to this big supermarket, and we should buy food for the week when we were staying there. And they planned, okay, we're going to eat this for like Tuesday, and we're going to eat that for Wednesday. And for every weekday, they bought too much, of course. And then, since they had this plan, they didn't have any space for using up leftovers. So they were sort of building up leftovers during the week. So I would say
leftovers should be part of the plan then.
Yeah, if you should have a plan, you should also have space in the plan for eating leftovers. But I know, probably most people here could handle that type of planning. But I mean, there is a lot of people out there that when they have a plan, they skip taking care of leftovers.
Can I respond to that? When I said planning, I meant look in the cupboard and see if you've already got 3 packets of oats. Do you really need a 4th?
No, I understand. That's what it was more to make this panel discussion a bit more fun. I was saying I don't agree on that, but no. And I mean, look in your fridge before you buy is, of course, a very good habit. So, so reduce food coming in will reduce the waste.
Do you wanna? Okay, because I was thinking to bring us, because we have been talking about the consumer level, which is important, but as Ingrid said also, there are numbers that are hidden within like the chain before us. So I would like to know your opinion on that, on who is responsible to lead this challenge that we have to reduce food waste. We can do as much as we can, right? But then who should we be looking at? Should we ask the government to commit about this subject? I don't know. Just to think about how other actors can take part of this apart from us, like citizens? What should we ask?
Yeah, it's a tough question, I think, because I mean, a lot of the actors along the food supply chain, they have adjusted what they do in order to make as much money as possible, and then probably it's better for them to have some waste, because then they can sort of focus on their mainstream things. But if they also should put resources and time into take care of their waste streams, it will be less economic for them. So how do you as a society punch that sort of? It could be by economic things like taxes on food waste or waste streams or so, but it could also be using legislation like prohibiting throwing away things and so on. Yeah, more of legislation. So I mean, there are different ways to come forward here, like taxes, legislation, but you can also think of awareness from customers, that they you can have some kind of certification, and companies that have a low waste can have this certificate or something, and maybe get better on the market or so. So there are different options, and I can't say which one is best because I don't know. Yeah.
But certification sounds like something that could be implemented here.
I think it should be fixed on the national level, and I think the end goal in Sweden at least should be that food waste should be illegal, or that companies that have leftover food, other than like lowering the price and trying to sell it to customers, that they should donate it or just produce less of it. I mean, I don't know how often I've been in the store and they have like a mountain of avocados and it's never empty because they keep refilling, and a lot of it goes bad. And I think that since there's no penalty for doing that, stores will keep doing it. And that's why Ultimat is a good option, because it's not like mountains and mountains of a product. It's custom made, and I like that. So legislation, and you can also give something back to the companies that actually focus on it.
Yeah, so I think that this is a huge question, actually. Obviously, government level taxes and legislation, and then at a regional level, you could argue that Region Uppsala might say, for example, "Ooh, our yellow buses are powered by your food waste." Apparently, that's true. So, you know, in an ideal world, that wouldn't be the case. But in England, where I come from, buses aren't powered by food waste. So you could argue that there's more food waste in Britain than there is in Sweden, because it goes to landfill rather than to power our buses. I don't know. That's a whole other argument. You know, you could look at the commune at that level, for example. They can share some responsibility. They are very good at setting up initiatives for people to grow their own vegetables, but then a few months later take that initiative away. And they've done that quite a few times recently to a lot of people's great frustration. So, for example, with the Stadsodlingsåret, which was about 5 years ago, they put a lot of money and marketing and attention into it to try and encourage people to grow their own food, and then removed all the funding. So there was about 30 or 40 groups that set up gardening initiatives like the one at Ultuna, only to find that all of their funding and all of the help was suddenly pulled at the last minute. So, you know, that doesn't help, that kind of unjoined up thinking. I think perhaps journalists and the media have a huge role to play in reducing food waste, because most people watch TV and read the newspapers and follow social media, and I think the people responsible for that content have a huge role to play in this. And then you have people like Tristan Stewart. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy in England. He's a food waste campaigner in the UK, and he and other people like him are doing huge amounts of campaigning and different things to reduce food waste and to bring the food waste issue to the attention of the public. Farmers, can they do something about food waste? I'm not sure. Supermarkets, I would have thought, are hugely responsible. For example, carrots. If your carrots are the wrong shape, the farmer's got to chuck them away. That's not great. So I would have thought the supermarkets have a big role to play. But then that goes back to government legislation. Should they be fined and taxed if they're piling up all these avocados and letting them go to waste? So restaurants, they've got a role to play. So I think there isn't one answer. I think that there's multiple answers.
We have already said everything there is. No, but I agree. I agree with you. There's not one answer, and I agree with all of you as well. I wanted to comment on the fact that the public buses are fueled with food waste, and I wanted to say that. Well, let me just give a definition of what food waste is. There's many. It doesn't mean that my definition is right or wrong. But I'm just gonna say, before I start saying something else, that I would consider food waste something that food that is produced and it's intended for human consumption. So if it goes for fueling buses, there is waste, because all the resources that were put into producing it, all the energy, all the labor, would not have been put if the intention was to fuel buses. So there's gonna be some waste. And I think this specific example is very tricky, because if you're telling society, oh, take the bus, it's fueled with your food waste, that might be an excuse to throw away food as well. So I wanted to, when I was listening to you, I thought, okay, she already said it, but I wanted to say communication and giving the right information to people, maybe giving, funding to media outlets, us, of course. But yeah, and I don't know if I had something else in mind. I can steal the microphone later.
So on the theme of making it more interesting, I'm gonna go against ideas that legislation could fix food waste, because we're touching on it here. I don't think food waste is confined to a single context. I think food waste is a problem that exists in multiple contexts. And when I say that, I mean you won't find food waste being a problem of only the supermarkets, only the producers. It exists in family dynamics. Some families throw away more food. It exists in economic dynamics, like we've been talking about. Sometimes it's maybe not economically smart to, it can be economically good that you throw some food away, So it exists in the economy. It exists in the political system. It exists in these multiple contexts, and trying to control them with legislation is impossible. It will actually never really work. So we can try and treat the symptoms, but if we want to fix the problem, we gotta tend to the premises where the problem arises, where the symptom arises. What are the premises that see food waste arise? And that's a bit what I was talking about earlier. We got to take it at a bigger scale, and we got to say that it's probably that we have an industrialized food system where food is produced so far away from me, I could never make sense of where it's produced and the energy and the waste that goes into that. So the premises maybe would be that we actually try and produce the food as locally as possible. I mean, there are multiple ideas around how we could increase the food production in urban areas, for example, without a bunch of fossil fuels, etc. So I think that we shouldn't put our hope and faith in legislation. We should tend to the premises of the entire system, and we do that by start using these biologically dead spaces, grow a garden. And even if we don't eat everything we do in the garden, that won't be waste. We'll compost it, we'll feed it to the soil, we'll build soil, and slowly and surely we'll get more nutritious vegetables the next year. That fact that my food is produced on the other side of the planet is a huge problem, and legislation in Sweden won't fix that. I think legislation can be a complement, but so just let me clarify. I think legislation can be a complement, but it won't fix food waste.
It's possible that it can fix things at a supermarket level, that a law can be implemented so that the supermarkets have more responsibility for food waste. But at a personal consumer level, absolutely, I agree with you, that's up to the individuals. Yeah, and the other thing that occurred to me when I was listening to you is that there's an argument as well that perhaps food is too cheap. Food that comes from across the globe, in my opinion, is too cheap. Why is it that you can buy a packet of beans, green beans, that are farmed in Kenya at a huge environmental toil to those people who are growing the beans? They're getting sprayed upon by aeroplanes with fertilizers and pesticides from above. And then those beans are shipped across to Sweden and put in plastic packaging. Why are those beans cheaper than the ones that you can buy from the farmer, which are completely unpackaged, which are grown just down the road, 20 kilometers away? For me, that is a huge issue about food waste. It doesn't make sense. Why aren't we taxing the food miles, Why aren't we taxing all this food that's grown from so far away? Surely it should cost far more to buy food that's grown on the other side of the world than food that's grown here. But it's not. It's the other way around. And if your packet of beans from Kenya is dirt cheap, sorry, but you're going to throw it away much more easily than if it's really expensive. Most people do.
Yeah, I can comment some as well. I think we need to use all the tools we have. So I think legislation could be used in some instances, and then we shouldn't say no to that. But I don't think, and I agree on that won't be the only solution. We need a lot of solutions. But I think the actors that where the waste arise, they should be more responsible for organizing themselves to so that this side stream could come to use instead. I can take the example of I've done a study on cattle farms, and there's a lot of cattle dying at the farms. The meat that's lost is around maybe 9%, so it's quite a lot. And if there is some kind of pressure on farmers so they come together and organize themselves so there can be slaughterhouses for these animals that die on the farm, because they can't go on the van if they're injured, so these injured animals will stay at the farm and die and go to waste. And if there were legislation, there could be incentives for them to organize themselves and use this resource. That's one example. There are other things too. And I also think that a climate tax on food would be good. And not only the miles, because most of the climate impact comes from the production and not the transport. But the climate tax on food that would bring up the prices would make people more value food better.
Okay, to round up this panel discussion, I thought we might throw in a more controversial question, and maybe you can quickly comment on that. So, do you think there are certain diets that are more likely to generate more food waste, and how should we approach that question? Diets, yes.
Yeah. I can start since I'm holding this.
Okay.
I mean, there are food is different in its environmental impact. So, to me, it's not the kilos of food waste that matters. So if you threw away lettuce, iceberg lettuce, for example, 1 kilo of that wouldn't be as bad as throwing away 1 kilo of cheese. So even if we need to turn into more vegetarian food for a lot of reasons, but not least from environmental perspective. So if that would lead to more waste in the household, but that waste is made of vegetables, it's okay. So you shouldn't only look for the kilos. It's the type of waste that also matter. And I think it's not really an answer on the question, but I think we need to get people not being afraid of food, but be more familiar with it and how our bodies work with taste and smell and so on. So it's a bit like getting more familiar with the soil that you say, but and add on that, get more familiar with the food itself as a biology creature you are. So, I mean, I know there are people throwing away food just because of the date, and I think we need to use our ability to determine which food is good or not. So, I mean, there are a lot of examples of things you can eat. I've eaten 1-year-old yogurt, for example.
1-year-old?
Yeah. That tasted okay. Yeah, I know.
I think it depends, because no matter what diet you have, you still need to have the knowledge, like you said, to know what is meant to be like thrown away. You need to throw it away because otherwise you'll get sick, and what can still be saved, like certain breads. Feel it, listen to it. Is it bad? Can you save it in some way? No. If you can't, throw it away or make croissants or whatever. Or if the yogurt still works, then it works. But I think if you have the information, then that's really what matters. But I don't think it's like, of course, on the production level, growing meat does require quite a lot more. And as you said, 1 pound of lettuce is much less waste than 1 pound of cheese. But I think, like, for me, sometimes I do eat meat, but that doesn't mean that I waste more food at home, versus if I were to only eat vegetables. That, like, there's no direct correlation to that. So I don't think we can frighten people off and say, like, you have to have a certain diet, otherwise you're creating food waste. But as long as we have the knowledge for it, I think we can tackle it.
Yeah, but I think that, like, if we would move to a certain diet, then, as you pointed out, as was pointed out before, like, certain diets may be a different equivalent of, like, kilos. Like a kilo, as you said, a kilo of salad is not a kilo of meat in waste. So I guess that is one thing to consider. Yeah.
Yes, I definitely think we should go towards more vegetable diets. What's the name? Yeah. Plant-based diets, and so I have done that as well, and that does lead to less food waste, and we should encourage that, but that's not the only solution, for me at least. I mean, if I were to try to encourage my parents to do that, they would say no. If they were to eat all vegan diets, it wouldn't work for them. But if they were to lessen their meat consumption, that's definitely possible, and I think that goes for most people. And that also leads to less food waste.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure where this question is going, but yeah, I'm not an expert on all the statistics about the vegan diet versus the whatever diet and food waste, but I can say from my own personal point of view, I'm a localitarian. So that means that I eat food which is local to the place where I live, or I try to as much as possible. And if that means eating some lamb that's grown in a farm in Hårby, I will do that, because I know that lamb has had a good life and has lived in good conditions, and that the farmer is done good work, and I want to support my local economy. But obviously we should all move to a more plant-based diet, I would agree, and I don't think anyone refutes that. But in terms of trying to get everyone to go vegan, no, I don't think that's going to happen, not in our lifetime anyway. And I'm not quite sure of the benefits of doing that anyway. But I will say that there are some very good reasons, not about your diet, but about where you go shopping. And I think that where you get your food from is actually possibly more important and certainly more relevant to this conversation, where we get our food from. So, if you look at, for example, the model of a food cooperative, what kind of food waste do they deal with? You might have a farmer who is a producer for a food cooperative, and they might be running a CSA, community supported agriculture. Well, there might be some food waste associated with that. We have an example. There's a farmer at Ramshoof Gård, which is just in Björklinge, which is just north of Uppsala, and the farmer there, he has a CSA, and he delivers food boxes around Uppsala, but there is some food waste associated with that. What does he do with his food waste? He sells it to Ultimat, and the vegetables that we buy from him are the food waste. It's the surplus that he cannot sell through the CSA. So I think it's important to consider, where do you get your food from in the first place? Are you growing it yourself? That's the best option. And if you can't, or that's not enough, you can't grow enough food because your growing season's too short because you live in Sweden, well then the food cooperative, the farmers market, and these kind of options are available to everyone. There used to be 3 food cooperatives in Uppsala. Now there's only 1, and I think that's a real shame. And I really hope that more food cooperatives will start to spring up soon in Uppsala.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At this point, I don't know what to say. I've been thinking so much and listening to everybody. Well, obviously, the best diet is dumpster diet. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, I mean, what?
It hurts your teeth when you bite a dumpster.
Well, yeah, but I wanted to tell you a story. I don't know if that's gonna answer the question, but I just wanted to share it. When I moved out of my parents, my mom's, that's when I moved to Sweden. I lived on my own for the first time, and then I noticed that when I would cook, I would do things that my sister or my mom would do when they cooked. And then at some point in my journey, I started questioning everything I do, and I also questioned my food traditions. And yeah, I noticed that, for example, I was cutting the edges of the zucchini, both, and throwing them away. And I thought, why the fuck am I doing that? Just because my sister and my mom did it. So I stopped. And I think if this is a way to answer the question, I would say just like look into your own habits and your culture traditions, because there's a lot of waste going on in the way we do things just because it's a tradition. Yeah, and I think that says it all.
So as the producer representative, I just want to say also, we're talking a lot about food waste as in the actual food, but the waste related to the food, we also have to bring into consideration. There is a lot of pollution, eutrophication in Sweden. You have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, etc., related to that food production. And what I would say with the diet is that if you would go all plant-based, that might, according to some graphs, bring down your greenhouse gas emissions, but you're still in a polluting relationship with the planet. If you're buying avocados from the other side of the planet, you're still in a polluting relationship. So the diet, as Claudia is onto, that would actually try and solve things at the systems level, would be to start producing your food, or if you can't do that, engage with the local farmers, try and be really local. And the diet also has to be adapted to the local. We cannot eat tomatoes and avocados if you live far up in Norrland. It just doesn't make any sense to me, because the relationship that doesn't produce any waste up there, that actually regenerates the soil, is based on how that ecosystem functions, and that's how we have to study. It's the foundation of permaculture. What is the ecosystem? What is the context? What is the environment? How do we interact? How do we design the way we grow food based on how the natural world works where I live? If you follow that principle, you won't produce waste. And that's in the wider sentence of that word, not just I'm throwing away the piece of bread. I'm not polluting. I'm building soil. I'm regenerating the environment. Farmers don't have to be villains as we portray them a lot today. They can be heroes. Regenerative agriculture is one of the most hopeful movements we have on this planet, in my opinion. And but it's only if we shift this idea of there's one diet, there are multiple diets, and we have to interact with the ecosystems around us and understand these and change what I've been trying to say this entire evening. Change our relationship to the natural world around us. That's at the essence how we will tackle food waste, in my opinion.
All right. Thank you all for your very, very interesting inputs. We will have a 20 minutes break. Even though we are 10 minutes late, I think we should still have a break. And then we will come to the question and answer round.
Yes, so we have a fika there, based on our food waste system. So, from Bruised Food Club, of course. It's donation based, so you can go serve yourself and you can donate to Bruised Food Club. You can take it for free to leave it at speakers. It's on us.
Yeah, maybe I can make a clarification here.
Yeah.
So Bruised Food Club collects food from different suppliers, not from their dumpsters. Also, if you want to change your diet and have a more wasteless diet, you can of course come to our markets and get some of the food that we collect on Fridays at 3:45, either here or at Idéhuben, which is in the more central area. Idéhuben, Forumtorget, yeah.
And then we're gonna have these questions so we can interact a bit more. So, yes.
From the panel. All right, are there any people who have questions that they have in mind and want to ask to our panel?
Suddenly very quiet.
Okay.
We're talking a lot, people.
Okay.
So yeah, I have a question to the garden. So if I join, is it like a community garden? We all work together and then divide food or something, or we all have our own pieces of land that we cultivate?
So there are a few different types of community garden. We have set it up as an example of how to run an urban farm, basically. So we have a board of 10 people, and if you're in the board, you're free to, or you come and help out, and you literally learn how to run a farm enterprise, the different ways of selling, marketing, everything. And you can eat as much of the vegetables as you want during the season. Then we have ambassadors, and they come, whenever they have time. We have events like plant trees, plant potatoes, water, and every time you're there and you're helping out, if there's food around, well, take some food with you home. So that's how we run it. But we produce a lot of food, so we try to sell it. But we're a non-profit organization. We're all doing it on voluntary basis. So all of the money that we make from selling the food goes straight back into buying trees, bushes, finishing the project, starting new projects. So the organization is about increasing the way, urban food production, urban farming in regenerative ways. So those are the ways you can get engaged. Either board member, and then it's a lot more responsibility, or ambassador, you come whenever you have time. And
is it okay if I ask this with the same person again? I just want to know if you do educational events, or you work in this direction as well, like some events that I can join where you clarify why it's important, and also maybe some activism, like strikes for people who live on in a big house with a lot of land, and then they don't use it, and you, I don't know, throw tomatoes on them or something. Do you do that?
We do educational events. We have had courses this year in permaculture, in soil, like we talk a lot about the soil ecology and how to cultivate soil, because we cultivate soil, we don't cultivate the plants. The soil take care of the plants. And so you can definitely join those courses. We've had also in the winter, not in the garden kind of courses, but more like theoretical, which I think is less valuable than actually seeing and touching. But we've done both, and I think we have an ambition of continuing that, doing that. And in terms of the activism, I mean, once you have a garden, established it's not a bunch of work, in my opinion, but making half an hectare of a garden on a voluntary basis, you have to put a lot of energy. There's no getting around that. So we haven't done any activism yet, and I'm not sure our current crowd are the activists. I love guerrilla gardening. So we might be cultivating a bunch of trees, and maybe we cultivate more than we need, and we can throw a guerrilla gardening thing if we got a bunch of trees over. That'd be cool. I like the idea.
This is weird. I just had I don't know, maybe a thought and also a question to you, because I'm not really sure how you operate. But I read a lot before that a problem in supermarkets for food waste could be that they want to offer 5 different sorts of bread or oats or whatever to give people an assortment of food, and that's why they have to throw some, because they don't want to be the supermarket that only offers one brand and gives less options, and then maybe they don't have to throw, but the customers might not come because they don't have the opportunity to choose. And I was wondering if you, when I buy oats from you, would that be, I don't know, I just thought that probably it would be the case that you have a lot smaller assortment of products, and if you feel like that's a good thing when you shop, and also maybe your experience, or giving people less options, or if that could hinder people to choose from you because they can't choose from 10 different sorts of jam. yeah, it's just a thought that came up, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good question. Perhaps our friend could put up the Ultimat. This is the bestellingsdocument, the order document. So you can. This isn't available on our website. You can only see it if you're a member. So this is a little sneak preview. This is a little guide to some of the things that we sell. So unfortunately, this month, the guy who delivers the flour and the oats and all of this stuff, he wasn't delivering, so you won't see him on there. But for example, we do sell one type of oats rather than multiple types of oats. This could be a problem. Like, for example, one of the people who shares my house is a diabetic, and he cannot eat like small ground oats. He has to eat the big ones. So I buy the oats from Ultimat, and he buys the oats from the supermarket. So Ultimat have had that discussion with the farmer. Can you get them to change the size on the mill to give us larger oats? And they say, well, no, it's not worth it because we're not going to have enough demand. So we don't do that. But we can talk to our producers and ask them if they'll produce different things. But basically, the availability and the variety that we sell is purely given to us by our producers. So it's not Ultimat which says to the producers, we want you to do rye bread and this and this and this. It's actually they come to us and they say, this month we will offer this and this. So you can see, for example, here, there's a big variety of different types of lamb that people could buy. And this is from a farmer, I think he's about half an hour north of Uppsala somewhere, out in the countryside. So if you go down or go up, maybe we can see some other things. And you can see it's both in Swedish and in English. So Johannes, they give us the whole plant. So you're not just buying a bunch of lettuce that's been cut, but you actually get the whole plant with the roots and everything. And this is really great because all of those products, it's aquaponics, it's grown. And so they with a fish, and they give us the whole plant, so you can actually go into your garden and plant it. So that's really good. So then you kind of get two for the price of one. And then Syltkrykken, who are the jam producers, that you've probably seen them if you go to the farmers market on a Friday. They have about 20,000 different types of jams, so you've got a huge variety of jams to choose from. If you go down, you can see all of them. Yeah, it never stops, and it's all local produce. So they've got their factory quite close to Uppsala. Yeah, it just goes on and on. You see, there's so many of them. So there is variety depending on which producer you're talking about. If you're talking about the egg producer, who is in Vrettertorp, which is just over the bridge, just outside Uppsala, they've got eggs from hens or they've got eggs from quails. These little small birds. So, yeah, there is variety. But yeah, I think probably we've looked at that enough. But if anyone's interested to know how to join Ultimat, I can tell you about that, or you can talk to Natasha, who's with the red jersey there. She's our communications coordinator for Ultimat.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. I have another question. So now during winter, I guess you don't offer that many vegetables. Do you have any other ideas where you can get fresh vegetables, or like where should you buy vegetables during the winters then?
Yes, that is the eternal question. If you live this far north of the equator, where the hell should you buy your vegetables at this time of year? Yeah, I think especially in the spring, actually. In England, it's called the hungry gap. So it's the time when nothing's growing and you can't get any vegetables, and what do you do? Sometimes our friends at the permaculture garden at SLU produce potatoes and give them to us. Some of the farmers produce carrots and cabbages and sort of root vegetables all the year round, which they produce for us. But a lot of the fresh vegetable producers just stop. They say, we don't have anything. Maybe they're doing a box scheme, a CSA, and they give their priorities to their customers rather than to the food co-op. So, yeah, there is quite a few months when there isn't any availability at all, and we simply don't sell. We simply don't sell any fresh produce.
There is a battery there in the box. On the speaker, there should be a battery for the microphone.
Here?
Yes.
It's okay.
This works.
Just coming back to kind of the food taxing and making food more expensive that's from further away, how does that work in relation to kind of different socioeconomic classes? Because some people might not be able to afford the luxury of buying locally and affordably in something like even Ultimat, or buying the oats that come from Sweden instead of from somewhere where it's really cheap. Kind of how does that connect? How do you feel that we can tackle that issue? To kind of anyone that wants to say something.
Well, I think that's a great question, and that's where it comes into, the food system. What the hell is that? Because you have this problem. We need a sustainable food system, but producing food in a wholesome and fair way to the environment, it takes labor. Every human labor that you take away, you're replacing with fossil fuels or pesticides, etc., etc. So food that is not detrimental to the environment will be more expensive in today's world. So you got to do multiple things at the same time to make sure that people can have access to that food. In Atlanta, they did a community garden of 7 hectares in one of these food wastelands that they have in America, where you can't get a fresh piece of fruit anywhere. 7 hectares of a community garden, food forest, everything to provide fruit and vegetables to really poor people. And so it's about, for me, it's about doing multiple things at the same time, ensuring access and opportunity to that fresh food, and not necessarily only talking about subsidies or things. But I also think we have a redistribution problem, but that's a different discussion altogether. But do you see what I'm saying? That there are I think it's a question of opportunity and access to also being able to produce your own food. So I would be in favor of some sort of land reform.
I'm sorry, but I forgot the question. Could you repeat it?
How do we make sure that good local food is accessible to poorer communities? And how can they be involved within this food waste issue if we've been talking about local production and kind of better for the environment production? How do we take care of them? That's a really good question, and it's in fact something that my colleague and I on the panel were discussing during the break. I think it's absolutely sick, the system as it is at the moment, that food, good quality, locally produced organic food is for the rich white middle class, basically. And I think it's ridiculous. The whole system is twisted. And I think that we need to completely change the way that our relationship with locally produced ecological food. I understand that the farmers and the producers of these food have to make a living, but there has to be a way, we as a society have to find another way to relate to locally produced ecological food and to sell it at a low, so that it's affordable for people who really need to buy it, and that it shouldn't be in the enclave of only the rich white middle classes. It's absurd. And it's also something that I've noticed. I've lived in several different countries over the last 20 years. I've lived in Spain, I've lived in Britain, and I lived in Sweden. And I've noticed that it's something which is, I'm afraid, Sweden specific. It could be Scandinavia specific, I don't know. But organic, locally produced food is at a premium in this country, which it isn't in other countries. In the UK, there are so many organisations which are doing so much good work to get locally produced ecological food to families who are in real poverty-stricken situations. And I know that that's happening in Holland and in Germany and in other countries. So why it can't happen here, I don't know. But I think that we need to, the whole of our society has to change, to something has to shift to address that. Food banks, I don't know what the answer is. I think there's lots of answers. Getting people to grow more of their own vegetables and to have more of a connection with food and where it comes from is part of the solution. But yeah, there are multiple solutions.
Yeah, I can just add something here, because I think that the redistribution of or subsidizing this, it's not, we're missing an opportunity if we go down that path. Like, I mean, literally in really poor communities in Atlanta, in Detroit, where you give access and opportunity for people to produce something that's essential to life, you're giving them the tools to take themselves out of poverty, to take control of their own life. Food is a way out of poverty. It's a way of ensuring basic needs, nutrition, things that they could never buy. So I think that we should not approach this as let's make food cheaper. I think we should approach it more as let's give poorer communities the opportunity to take food production into their own hands. That's for me the ultimate emancipation strategy.
I wanted to add something to this. It's something that just came to my mind. Food sovereignty is a problem everywhere, and it's I don't remember the figures now, but I know that a big percentage of poor people globally are farmers, which is it shouldn't happen. It's unacceptable, and a lot of land grabbing is going on everywhere as well. Like people who have their farms, who grow their food, it's been taken away from them, and there are a lot of things like this that need to be addressed if we are to push for better access to food.
I wanted to ask you, Max, did you have any examples for the last thing you said?
There are multiple examples, and they're mainly coming out of America, as far as I know, where you have formerly industrialized areas of Detroit, where community gardens are springing up, where people's backyards are turned into grazing lands, where they produce food, and crime goes down, it plummets. There are many social benefits, community, sort of togetherness. And also the Atlanta. Those are the two that pop into my mind. But maybe there's somebody in the audience, or maybe Claudia,
I have an example from the UK of a food cooperative in Cornwall, the Falmouth Food Cooperative, which is selling food at a higher level of price to some customers, and then is reducing the price of food for other customers. So people pay as on a what I can afford basis. And so that works really well. So they're given a sort of guide to what they should pay. So for example, 50 crowns or whatever, £5 for this produce. And if you afford it, you can pay for it. If you want to pay more, you pay more. And if you want to pay less, that's fine. And so it balances the books at the end of the day. Yeah. There are loads of good examples around the place of this kind of thing.
Anyone else has questions or a thought that you would like to share? Anyone on the panel? Another.
Just a very quick thought on the thing you just said about the pricing. It made me think of our markets, because we usually say, hey, you can donate something for the food, maybe you can think about how much this would cost you in the supermarket. At least I think Alva said that once, and I found that really cool how you portrayed it. Because I think sometimes you forget what the food you have in your hands, like how valuable it is, and when you then go, like when you have this opportunity to pay more because you can afford more, and others pay less because they cannot afford it, or when you are at our market and you think about how much would this maybe be in the supermarket, or like, because it's easy to come and grab your bread and go home and not pay anything or not donate anything, but then I think it's sometimes nice to start thinking what it's actually worth, and that it took some, it took resources to produce it, and I find it really interesting, this pricing, model, because I read about this before, like, how do you say, I don't know, there's a word for it, but this opportunity to decide yourself how much you can and want to pay, and I find that really interesting, thinking about the value of the food.
That's also going back to the idea that Max was saying about how if you're engaged with where your food is grown and how it's grown, if you understand how a loaf of bread is made and where that flour is grown, where the wheat is grown, what goes into growing it, how it's milled, how it's transported, how it's turned into a loaf of bread. If you understand that process because you've engaged with food, then you know what's right to pay.
Yeah, and I think often this is not, we don't really think about it usually. We just go to the supermarket, get it, and usually, I mean, you just accept the price and you pay it, and then, you don't really connect it to what's behind the product in a way, I think. Comes back to reconnecting with the food system in a way.
I would like to ask you. It's very short. I don't know if I needed the microphone. So when we're talking about reconnecting, it means with the soil, it means with the ecosystem, and I think it also means with the labor that is behind. And so far, things we buy in the supermarket is a lot of really bad paid and bad labor around the world. So to see that it's ecological and also a social big issue, so has different dimensions.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Well, going back to the pricing of food, especially in supermarkets, we might have different definitions of what cheap or expensive is, but one thing is for sure, the food that we find at the supermarket has been thoroughly worked to be cheaper, to maximize profits. It doesn't include externalities, it doesn't include environmental costs, it doesn't include social costs, like Maria was saying just now. So I think we might even have a quite twisted way of valuing food now because we are used to it. So maybe we start, I don't know, growing our own food, or we go to buy food from a local farm and we're like, no, but this should cost much less. Should it really? It's a question. And then I wanted to add something else. It has nothing to do with this, but because we're gonna end, and I didn't want to end without saying this. Lenny talked about the markets that we organize. One thing that we say is take what you want and pay what you can, and then with that, connecting to this, because I wanted to connect both things, I wanted to say that civil society organizations, youth organizations, non-profit organizations are doing a lot to fight for a better future, to fight the climate crisis, and I encourage all of you to engage because we are really doing a lot of things. We're really putting pressure, and I've been following the COP 26, and I was a bit disappointed about what happened in the discussion, in the negotiations themselves, but then I saw that there was so much going on outside, and that the people who care, who are taking action every day, are bringing change because they are pushing, they are forcing decision makers to do something because they can't avoid it. They can't look away anymore. So just a message of hope, and I encourage all of you to take action. Just by being here, you are taking action. So thank you for coming.
Yes. We can do like a final words if you want to share some final words to close tonight.
Okay. Yeah, there was something that I know gone out of my head. Yeah, so if anybody's wondering how do I join Ultimat, you go to the website, which I think we're going to see now on the screen. Ultuna.se, and there's a green button on the first page that says become a member. You click on there, and then when Ultimat has got your email address, you will automatically be added to the member list, and you will receive the newsletter, and on there you can click on the order document that you saw before, and when you place your first order you pay the fee, which is every term, and by paying that fee you become a member of Ultimat. And anyone can participate in any of the workshops that we run. So if you follow our Instagram and Facebook pages, which our friend Natasha is in charge of, you can see all of the workshops, all of the events that we do, and those are free. Anyone can participate. Some of them you get benefits if you're a member, so you get you get like to take away stuff for free afterwards or something. But yeah. There was something else I was going to say. What was it? I can't remember. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, we'll continue here.
I think it's important to remember that you don't have to have the land to participate. You don't have to have a lot of time to grow. I mean, some people don't have the land to grow their own food. They don't have the time to grow their own food. I know that I at times don't have that. But reconnecting to the soil doesn't just mean that you yourself have to grow it. You can connect to the farmers. You can go to Permakultur. You can go to Ultimat. You can go to the Friday markets that we have at Idéhubben. It's much more than just growing or feeling pressure that you have to grow your own tomatoes. You can do a lot more, and as Alva said, being here, thanks by the way, is a part of that.
I can just finish off by saying thank you for having us here, and I'd like to encourage everybody to engage with the concepts that David Holmgren and Bill Mollison launched in permaculture. It really gives a new perspective on waste. It gives a new perspective on relationship to land, on the human part of or the human in the ecosystem, and it's a more of a holistic approach also to this very topic of food waste that I think is so hugely important to meet the challenges of our modern world. And you can do that in whatever way you want. YouTube is a great resource, or you join us in Ultuna Permakultur and talk about that. Whatever you prefer. But I really encourage that as a really, as an empowering thing to do and to get engaged in.
And with that, we can thank our speakers there. And then we also have some gifts for our panel members. Unfortunately, one left us already. But
Ingrid had to go, but
it's tea. I was asked to promote BFC. So yes, please come to our markets. Please consider donating. Huh? The stickers, we have stickers. Yes, we have recently printed stickers, and we were thinking if you, every one of you can take some 1-2 stickers with you, and you can plant them around the city.
Show how to join. Do we have it on the website?
Yes, I think that's the contact. So you would go to the main webpage, which is bruisedfoodclub.org, and then there is this sub-page, contact, and then you can put your name, email address, and you can become volunteer or member if you pay the membership fee. So
It's 50 crowns a year. And maybe also now that we're at it and we have team leader of communication here, check our social media. We're putting a lot of work into it. Facebook, Instagram, the website. Well, I know all that. We're waiting for you. Yes, and we have team education is writing blog posts every week, a recipe or an article about something interesting and informative. And we have some flyers here with the QR code, so you can get one and get started.
The advice that Max gave before about permaculture, I absolutely second that. It's really, really good advice. When I did a permaculture design certificate 100 years ago in Spain, it changed my life. So if you want to change your life, do a permaculture course. Really, it's the best thing. And the other thing that I was just thinking earlier that I forgot to mention, I think it would be really useful for the future, like where do we go from here? What's the next step? This is it's really interesting and it's really nice being here talking with everyone, but I feel slightly that we're preaching to the converted, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I don't think there's anyone in this room who's disagreeing with anything that anyone said, and it's kind of, I don't feel out of my comfort zone here. So maybe a next step would be to invite, some representatives from the commune, perhaps from some supermarkets, perhaps some of the kind of key players in Uppsala who are dealing with food issues and who are responsible for some of this waste, and maybe trying to hold them to account, and where can this conversation go from here?
I believe the team tried that, contact supermarkets, and
It would also be interesting to see their perspective. For example, like we didn't have anyone here who could tell us more about the supply chain, like before the food maybe reaches us. I mean, not like the normal supermarkets supply chain, what problems they face. I think that would be interesting for me because that's where we get, like most people get their food from there, and we don't know what's happening behind.
Supermarkets have 2 days. That's it. If their lorries don't get through, they've got 2 days, and that's that. They don't have any great reserves anywhere. It's crazy. And we saw that in countries like Spain or even here and in the UK and lots of countries where they just run out of food. 2 to 3 days. That's all the supermarket has in the supermarket. So when they run out of food, they run out of food. And if the lorries, if there's for some reason the lorries are not delivering the food to the supermarket, in 2 to 3 days, there won't be any food left in our supermarkets. So if you don't have access to a garden where you're growing your own food, don't get me started on that.
Local producers.
We don't have a food security minister in the Swedish government. The British government do. That's what we need to think about.
Well, we can continue with the more fika.
It's more fika, exactly.